Okay, we're looking at the HOT system now, Hotel Operation Training Simulation, and what I'm going to do is take you through when you get into the system, the first decision-making process that you're going to take. A couple of things will change after the first cycle, and I'll point out what those will be, because some things come online after the first cycle that are not there initially. But this is the process that I would expect you guys to go through when making a set of decisions. Most of it remains the same as you go through the system. So for each cycle, 1 month, for each cycle you will be going through this process. The more you understand it, the better you become at it, the quicker you will go through it. Also, once you've made your first set of decisions, we're talking about tweaking rather than making a whole new set of decisions. So each month you'll be looking at how your decisions impacted your performance within the environment, and then you will be changing your decision slightly to align them better with that environment, right? So think of it that way. Now, you've just logged in to the hotel. I'm using Team 1's hotel here as an example. I'm going to make some changes, but remember, until we do our first cycle, you can change anything back that you want, okay? So this is the screen that you come into. What you've got here is a load of reports in the middle here. Some stuff which I'm going to go through over there. You've got some messages that come through here. You've got some market research. And then most importantly, you've got your decisions tab, which we're going to go into in a minute, where you make your decisions. You've also got some extra stuff down the bottom here. Again, which we'll get to later on. Most of this is downloading reports that you can then utilize. Some of these have a couple of glitches in them, so if they don't work properly, just let me know. The other thing I will say about the HOT system is it works better in some browsers than other browsers. I find the best browser is Chrome on both PC and Mac, so I'd recommend using that. But the one that works probably worst is Safari. Okay, so Safari on Mac especially. Okay, when we're in the labs, I've had Chrome installed on all the computers, so I'll go through this with you week after next. But you should be using Chrome when you go in there. Okay. Okay, so you've just come into the system, you've just logged in. When you're in the lab, you might well be doing this in groups. You probably will be. You wouldn't do this outside of class. What you've got here, and this is things that you should look at before you come into class, is that background document. There's some background information in there. All of you already should have downloaded this, which you can do as a PDF, and gone through that information. Okay? Gives you background information into your starting position when you start the hotel. So you're going to look at that. After the first cycle, then you get some other stuff that comes online here. This is where I would start if I were you. The way to think about this is look at the qualitative information first, then the quantitative information before you make your decisions. So you've got your background document. You're not going to look at this each cycle, but you would look at it before you do your first set of decisions to inform your first set of decisions. There's some advice here. Feel free to completely ignore it, because the people who were running the hotel before were doing a terrible job. Okay? So it's fine to ignore that, right? That's your background document. The thing underneath it is called the HOT Reviewer. This is somewhat similar to TripAdvisor. Okay? It's a review site that customers can give you reviews on. So you want to go on there each week. Very importantly, you're looking at your percentage. You want that trending positively. Okay? And you're looking at new reviews to give you insight. Okay? Pretty certain you can't respond to reviews on here, on this system. Okay? You might be able to, but I don't think you can. Okay? But look at those reviews coming through. There can be alarm bells. Doesn't mean that you have to act on every single review, but certainly if you see patterns, you should be taking action. And if you see your ratings going down, that's obviously going to be an issue, right? So you'll see new reviews. With this site, sometimes you have to accept the adage that no news is good news. Right? So if you're not getting reviews, it probably means you're not really doing anything wrong. Okay? So don't see that as too terrible a thing, because sometimes you might have a couple of months where you don't get any reviews through. Okay? Then you also have social media underneath here. Now at the moment this isn't set up. I'm going to show you how you set it up when you do your first set of decisions. That will come online after the first month. This is somewhat similar in a very rudimentary form to a Facebook feed. Okay, so you'll get comments come up on there that are supposedly customers going onto your feed and posting comments. You can reply to these comments. And the AI of the system will read your replies, and it can impact your perception out there in the marketplace. Don't spend loads of time writing replies, just short replies are fine, but it does make sense to put replies, and it does make sense to take note of what's being said in these comments. Okay? What I would do with regards to replying to these comments is leave it until you've made your decisions. Once you've done that and you've got some spare time left, come back and reply to these. You can also develop your social media profile by putting a blurb about your hotel and putting pictures on there. Okay? So it's worth doing that again, having a bit of a social media presence. And the AI does read them. It's not particularly complex, but it does read your responses. Okay? All right, once you've done that, your main report that you're going to look at is that monthly indicator report in the middle. You may well also look at some of the other reports there. The really important other two are these two here, competitor sales and competitor status. They tell you what your competitors are doing with their hotel by comparison to you, what the in-room experience is like, and very importantly, what areas they're building and adding to the hotel.
Is it similarly like STR reports or no?
You have the STR report, you've got that there as well, right?
Okay.
So that's available for you as well. So you can use that. This is probably in more detail than that.
Okay.
So it's quite specific. These people are building a conference centre, these people are extending their restaurant, that kind of information, right? So you can look at what your competitors are offering to a certain extent, limited, but to a certain extent. And then in the competitor sales report, you can look at what they're charging. So if you get both of those up on the screen, you can only do this in the second cycle, you can really see where you fit into that. And it's an important thing to be able to differentiate yourself. What are we charging versus what we're offering versus everyone else? It's not the end of it, right? There's all sorts of other factors like your level of customer service, for example, the quality of your food experience, that kind of stuff that's more specified, but it does give you some sort of idea. So as of the second cycle, it's going to be important to compare those two things. Okay? So monthly indicator report, though, is a wealth of information. There is a weekly indicator, but because you're making monthly decisions, especially initially, I would argue that the monthly indicator report's the main report you should use. So this is for December of year 0. You take over the hotel with a year's worth of history of the hotel being run, not very well, by people who have been managing it before. So you've got a year's worth of history there. If we look at this monthly indicator report, we've got 12 December, 11 November, etc. So you've got 6 months worth of history here. If you go back to June, which you can choose at the top, then that'll give you the previous 6 months so you can access the year's worth of history there. Okay? What you can see here is weekday standard room sales, weekend standard room sales, weekday executive, weekend executive, weekday suites, weekend suites. These are all 0 because you don't have any. But you can add them. You start the hotel with a certain sum of money. In your case, it's about $2 million, about $1 million of that in cash and about $1 million in credit available to you to develop your hotel. Okay? So you can, if you want to, add weekday, weekend rooms. Weekday contract and weekend contract. There is the ability to win contracts. These are corporate contracts, usually at a lower rate, especially initially whilst you've got low occupancy. If you can win these, which you need to meet the criteria that they're looking for, then that can give you some additional occupancy. You've got your meals. These are whatever meal, breakfast, lunch, or dinner. One of those equals one meal. Okay? And these are external meal sales. So these are sales to people coming to the hotel who are not staying at the hotel. That's important to understand because you might see them go to 0 if you're using all your seats in your restaurant to service the guests who are there and you haven't got any spare to service external guests. Okay? That might happen later on if you get busy. So then you'd need to add more. You'd need to add more seats in your restaurant. Liquor sales, same thing. So these are external liquor sales. Okay. So again, obviously, these are all things that you want to trend upwards as best you can. And this is the important thing with this. What's more important than where you are is how you're trending. You take action that trends these things in the directions that you want to go. This report's good at showing you that, at being able to look over time and say, how are we trending positively or negatively, right? You don't have a conference and event centre. Again, this is something that you might want to add. We'll get to that later on when we look at decisions, but if you do, then you can start getting conference and event bookings. bookings come through, right? And they impact some other areas of your hotel. You do have the ability to offer group rates, okay, so you can potentially get group bookings in as well. So this includes a way of increasing your occupancy. You've got your total room sales there, so again you can look at this over time. What we can see here quite clearly is these guys have trended down since August, right? Quite a serious trend downwards. That would be a serious concern considering you're coming into a busier period. So something's very wrong there. But it allows you the space to turn it right around and provide something good, yes?
So how can I find the week-wise distribution of the occupancies?
Yeah, there's a weekly indicator report that's got the same information week for week. So if you want to...
Yeah, because as you said, like if there is a event and if it's a business event,
yeah.
So the booking will be there for the week, like
yeah.
weekdays.
Yeah, you can look at the weekly indicator report and it breaks it down. And later on you might want to, because you might want to set your rates on a week-to-week basis as opposed to a month-to-month basis.
Okay.
When you start, I would highly recommend just doing month-to-month because there's loads of other areas you've got to consider. But when you become good at it, you might then want to switch to do week-to-week. There's only really one area you can do week-to-week, and that's in the rates, but you might want to do the rates week-to-week. All right, now getting down to the bottom section. We've got our total rooms sold. Underneath that, we've got our total occupancy, right? Our room occupancy. And again, this was right up at 61. Over here, it's gone down to 36 now. So 36% occupancy in December is pretty tragic, right? There's a lot of space for improvement. So I would expect every single one of you guys to turn your hotel around quite considerably in year one. The challenge that you're going to have is you've got to make the argument for ongoing good performance. So you don't want year one, year two. Okay? What you want to try and get is year one, year two, year three. So a progression there rather than just a massive jump. And that's strategic. You've got your room occupancy, standard room, executive room, suite occupancy. Obviously you don't have executive rooms and suites at the moment. You've got the breakdown of weekday versus weekend. You've got your average room rate, your weekday, your weekend rate. So these are the rates that you put into the system. We'll get into that when we do the decisions. Now we get down to guest occupancy. Guest occupancy is how many of your rooms have 2 or more guests in them. Obviously, we want to have, of the rooms that are sold, we want to have as many of them with as many guests as possible, right? Up to a reasonable amount. Okay? Why is that?
More money, more revenue.
Yeah, more money, right? Okay. So we get more people in there, we get more people eating in our restaurant, using our facilities, and therefore we make more money, right? Now, this is a really important section here. This is our staff turnover. Really important to understand that these figures are, if that rate that we had last month continued for the year, what percentage of staff in that department would turn over. So if you've got 130%, it doesn't mean 130% of your staff left in 1 month. Okay? It means if the rate of people that left. So say for example, let's make this really simple. If I've got 12 people in a department and 1 person leaves in a month, that's 100% turnover. Because if you times that by 12, it would be 12 people. That would be 100%, right? So what this is, it doesn't look, it might look pretty dire, but it's okay. You might get much worse percentages than that. What these are is alarm bells to let you know that you got your staffing numbers wrong for the month. And it's saying, overall, this is the figure, but more importantly, you were actually fine in most of your departments. The place where you got it wrong was in your accommodation standard staffing. So the thing to remember here is that tells you where you should have been last month. Maybe I should have had 1 or 2 more staff members on last month in that area. It doesn't tell you where you should be next month. So you can go up to where you should have been, and then you've got to say, are we going to get busier or are we going to get quieter next month? Should I put more staff on or less staff on than where I should have been the previous month? And you can look back a year at history and get a trend idea from there. You can look at what events are taking place in the area as well and get an idea from there. Okay? So when you go to do your staffing decisions, this is one of the main places you're going to look there, right? Now, staff leave for 2 reasons primarily. They're too busy, they're too quiet. So if staff are leaving, you might have way too many staff on and staff are dissatisfied and leaving because of that. So what you've got to do is say, did that department get busier or quieter last month? If it got busier and staff left, it's probably because I didn't have enough on. Probably, not guaranteed, but probably. I could be chronically overstaffed, right? But if it got quieter and staff left, it may be because I've got too many staff on. Okay? Then we've got a bit of a financial analysis. So we've got weekly training amounts, market share. Couple of important ones here that we'll get to later on because these really do come up. We have something called a balanced scorecard report that we look at after each of the cycles where we see how you guys are competing against each other, okay? How you're performing. And one of the areas is market share. Another area is guest satisfaction, customer satisfaction, return on capital employed, gross profit percentages. So it's more than just financially. It's actually looking at those qualitative aspects of guest and customer satisfaction, right? So one of the things we really care about, one of the most important factors, is our market index. Our market index basically is how many people really like us out there. If you go to every 100 people, how many people are going to say, that's a hotel I really like? At the moment, 8 of them are. Not a very good outcome, right? The higher we get this, the more sustainable, the more popular, the bigger brand our product has. So what we want here is a really positive trend in that market index. Now underneath that, we've got public awareness. Public awareness is not how much people like our hotel. It's a direct measure of how well our advertising is doing. How many people know who we are. You ask every 100 people out there, an average 100 people, 38 or 39 almost people are going to know who we are. So this is a measure of our advertising success. How well is our advertising trending? Okay. So we'll get to that in a second. Refurbishment level. You start off as an economy hotel, budget hotel. You can refurbish up to a mid-range or to a luxury level. That again is a representation of the star system, the star level you want to be. And you choose your own star level, but there's no point where you say I'm a 1-star, 2-star, 3-star. It's just represented in the decisions you make. So if you're going to be 5-star, you've obviously got to be a luxury establishment, and you've got to refurbish up to a luxury establishment level. Okay? I'll show you how to do that when we get into the decisions. So then you've got no-shows. This just lets you know how many people are not coming who have booked. External meal sales, the percentage of them, revenue, gross operating profit per available room, total revenue, weekday standards, weekend standards, so seeing where that's come from, group money, F&B, total revenues there, sorry. You've got your income before taxes. So even with, what was their occupancy, 65 or whatever? They're still making 13 grand, right? This is 125 rooms in the hotel. That's terrible. Right? Something's horribly wrong there. Now they're making a loss, so $70,000 loss. So again, it shouldn't be very hard to turn that around and actually start making some money. But don't feel that you've got to make a load of money in the first 2 or 3 months. You want to establish yourself, develop your product in the first sort of 6 months, right? So things are going to go all over the place in the first 6 months. That's fine, that's expected. After 6 months, things should start to settle down. Okay? So underneath this, you've got the status of your hotel. Currently, this is the state of your hotel. Your rooms are in terrible condition. They're poor. So it goes very poor, and if you don't leave them for ages, poor, average, good, very good. Right? Those are the levels of refurbishment. Okay? As you can see, it goes down after time. These guys haven't done anything with it. It's gone down from average to poor. Here it's gone from good down to average. And if nothing is done, it'll go down to poor. That obviously impacts the guest experience. Okay? You need to decide what you're going to do with your refurbishment strategy. You might go up to very good and then keep it there. You might go up to excellent and keep it there. Okay? That's completely up to you. There's a cost involved in doing that. We'll get to that later. Now, one of the other areas, as I mentioned, you've got your quantitative feedback, which is primarily this. You've also got your qualitative stuff. Down the bottom here, you've got some customer comments. You've also got them in the trip reviewer. You've also got them in the social media, okay, and in the emails on occasion. And that's really good qualitative information. What you've got here, which you haven't really got anywhere else, is some staff comments as well. So you can get a bit of an idea if the staff are dissatisfied as to why they're dissatisfied. So some good information there to work with. Right. So we have looked at the HOTS reviewer, the social media, the monthly indicator, competitor sales and status once they're up and going, we'll look at those. The other thing we might look at, we've got our messages here, which just look like this. There's no messages in there at the moment, but what they tell us is when our competitors open different areas of their hotel, you get a little message coming through, and some of the feedback from staff and customers. Think of it as the kind of management by walking around responses that managers might get. The other area we might look at is our market research. Now, you've got this market research available to you. Once you've purchased it, it stays purchased and you can continue to access it. Okay? Some of this is free. So general business advice, again, be a little bit tentative about following that exactly because it's produced in an environment that's not been successful in the past. But things like calendar and local events is something which you probably want to buy. So to buy it, you just go there, you click yes, and it gives you that information, and it's accessible from that point onwards. It says purchased, and you can just open it. So this tells us what events are taking place in the local area, and that's obviously going to give us some indication of occupancy in the area, right? And maybe who to target. One which I would highly recommend is the effects of advertising market research at the top. As I said, you've got a couple of $1 million sitting around. Makes sense to buy some market research. So I would strongly recommend that because it's going to be helpful when it comes to making your advertising decisions. All right, once you've looked at all that information, and sometimes what I would recommend you doing is splitting the screen, especially on the computers through there, which are quite big and you can do this, and having the information on one side whilst you make the decisions on the other, because you can then refer to it. So looking at that information, leaving some of it open, you then go into the decisions to work your way through. So the decision screen looks like this. You've got these tabs along the bottom here. Don't worry about finance, you won't be making any decisions in finance, okay? But all the rest of them, you need to make a set of decisions. Once you've made your decisions, like I've said, you're probably not going to be changing them completely each time. In fact, that's probably a very bad strategy because you'll just confuse your guests. You're just going to be tweaking them based on the feedback that you've got from the reports that you've looked at. So now I'm going to quickly work my way through each of these and give you some recommendations. Okay? So I won't actually change anything so that you guys, so I don't give your strategy away to everyone else, but I'll just give you an idea. So this is the rates. This is our rack rate page. Okay? There is some discounting that we can do on top of this, on this and the next page, but this is our rack rate page. So what is our standard rate? As you can see, these guys are a budget hotel, right? So standard rate for our weekday rooms, weekend rooms. We don't have suites and executive rooms yet, so there's no rates in there. When we start building them, we can put rates in there and start advertising them if we want to, right? But we don't have any rates in there. The weekday and weekend rooms get a room for the night, breakfast is included. Okay, that's what they're paying for with that rate there. Okay? Same for these, room for the night, executive room or suite with breakfast included. We can give some discounts here. Discounts if they book 3 nights or more. Discounts for no breakfast. Discounts for non-cancellables. If our no-shows go up, we might give a discount here. At the moment, we don't have much of a problem with it. So maybe 0 to 1% there. Very slight discount, right? These, 2 to 5%, my advice, okay, 2 to 5% there. I wouldn't really be going higher than 5%, okay? Again, this is just my advice, feel free to completely ignore it, okay? You can again choose here. Now, you've got to ask yourself the question, if you do build suites, how high is up? Just to let you know that I was quite surprised last term that some people were selling their weekday suites for about $4,000 and getting away with it. They had a product which could justify it, but that's how high up you can go, right? These guys were getting crazy profit margins.
They think they are power.
So,
also.
the conference bookings, you won't be able to sell conference bookings until you add a conference and event center if you choose to add one. You might not choose to add one, just be aware that if you don't, some of your competitors might, and if they have that revenue and you don't, that can really impact your ability to compete, okay? Just a bit of a hint there, right? Once you add conference and event centers, we'll get to this later on, but conference booking rates include a room for the night, so they stay at the hotel, okay? Use of the conference facilities for their event, and 3 meals. So they get a lot for that rate that you're putting in there. It would still probably be somewhere around your weekday or weekend room rate, because you're talking about 50, 100 person bookings. So you do want to encourage those. So it's not going to be too expensive, but not too cheap. The group bookings doesn't require the conference and event centre. You can do it straight away. They stay in the hotel like everyone else. They get breakfast like everyone else, and they actually get an extra meal on top of that. So they get 2 meals and a room for the night for whatever price you put in there. So be aware of that. You still want to encourage group bookings, especially when your occupancy is low, but they do get quite a lot for this, right?
What's
Now,
the minimal people in a group? What group means?
I think it's 4 or 5. Now, if you have any questions like that, very valid question there, if you just go up to the top of the page, there's a question mark on each of the decision categories. You click that, you get loads of information there, right?
I just still need to fill up.
So groups.
They didn't say how many.
Yeah, it doesn't say. I think from memory though, it's between 4 to 5 and then upwards from there. Okay, so let's move to revenue management. Now, very important, between each of the tabs, hit the save button. This system, on the odd occasion, throws you out. And then you don't know you've been thrown out until you hit save, and then it backs you out the system and you've got to get back in. It takes a couple of minutes sometimes to get back in. Now, this happens once or twice a term. So it's not going to happen every week, but it might happen on the odd occasion. If you haven't hit save, you've got to go make all your decisions again. So each time you go between different tabs, hit that save option just in case it does that. Okay? So now we go to revenue management. Oh, sorry, contract down the bottom here. This is you pitching for corporate contracts. How much do you want to charge for a weekday and weekend rate for your corporate contracts? If you're doing this, I'd probably go somewhere around your group booking rate, right? To try and encourage your corporate contracts. And if it matches up to the specifications they're looking for, you'll get an offer for a contract. If you do, let me know as the owner, and I'll give you the final agreement on that, which means I have to tick it on my system for it to come through and you to win that contract. All right, revenue management. So this allows us, this is a promotional strategy that allows us to give some discounting to encourage bookings. Okay? What this first system is depending on occupancy, we can give discounts. So if the occupancy is less than 65%, we charge, say we change that to 80% of rack rate, what we had on the previous page. If it's less than 65. If it's between 65 and 75%, we charge 90% of rack rate, so what we got on the previous page, right? And then, so we change this to 75, because that doesn't make sense. If it's over 75, we charge 100% of rack rate. Okay? We can even, when we get busy, say at Christmas time, we can load here. So we can say we charge 110% of rack rate. Now this is only for about 10% of your bookings that come at the last minute. So that's to encourage late bookings if you've got low occupancy, or to get some more money out of late bookings if you've got high occupancy, you're probably going to fill up anyway. Okay? So that gives you the ability to do that. Merchant websites, these are these sites here. Over direct reservations, do we give them an additional discount to encourage bookings via those sites? A lot of hotels do this, it's completely up to you whether you do or not, right? At the moment, you're not selling via any of these two options that you've got available, Expedia and Bookings.com. Okay? At the moment, your occupancy sucks. So therefore, my advice would be, beggars can't be choosers, click on both of these. If you're doing the first one, Expedia, you might as well do Bookings.com because the commission on Expedia is higher. Right, it's about 24% or something like that, and Bookings.com is about 50. Okay, so if you do that, but I would recommend initially doing both of those. Okay, there is a second page here that we won't go into when you can actually control what's sold on the sites, but it's way too much detail to start with. Then you've got the ability to offer your hotel as part of a package deal with a flight to get a discount. So you might give a 2 to 3% discount there, 4 to 5, maybe even 10% discount here, okay, to encourage some bookings there. It's just ways to get extra bookings. You've got to choose whether you allow overbookings. Initially, it's not going to be a problem, but you know the inherent problems that you can have when you allow overbookings, and you might want to accept that or not, completely up to you. Okay? Then you've got your letting limits. So this is how much occupancy you make available to these types of bookings. You don't have a conference centre yet, so this doesn't affect you at the moment. But if you add one, you might want to say, well, because we don't make as much money from conference bookings, we only want a certain percentage of our occupancy to go to conference bookings. So initially, until your occupancy is high, I would do what they've done here and just have it at 100% and not restrict it. But when you start getting busy, then you might say, well, we want to restrict our conference booking down to 20% or 30% of our available occupancy. Okay? So your choice there. All right. Next. Sorry, I need to move a bit quicker if I'm going to get through all of this. So, food and beverage. Again, question mark's going to give you lots of information here on the menus. There's also some research, market research, that you can do to get some information. Don't worry about uploading menus. There's good menu options available in menus 1, 2, 3, and 4, so more choose what's appropriate to you there. Menu 1, budget meal. Okay? You know, 1-star, 2-star hotel level meal. Okay? Menu 4, fine dining. Okay? So look at the menus and you decide which one is most appropriate for your hotel. Choose suppliers, and there's research you can do here to match the type of menu that you're doing. You choose the right supplier for the right menu, you have a better product. Okay? Then choose how much you're going to charge for the meal. Remembering that this could be a multi-course meal. So if you're going menu type 4, I think it's a 4-course meal, you've got to charge enough to cover that 4-course meal. As an idea for a luxury hotel, it might be about $60. Okay, 70, maybe even 80 if you want to go there, right? Choose your your liquor pricing. 1, basic offering, basic price. Okay. 3, much wider offering, all sorts of different products, but then a higher price. Again, it should match your star offering here. Okay. You can be renowned as a great place to come for F&B. That could be one of your differentiations if you want to go that way. Okay. We hit save, and then we go on to the next one, which is our staffing levels. So these are full-time employees, FTEs, full-time employees. Okay? We make the assumption we don't have part-time and casual, we're just all full-time, just to keep it quite simple. Okay? And this is for the whole week. So this is running for the whole week. Obviously they're not going to work for the whole week, but this is how many we've got available to us. So department heads have got 4 hotel services. This is your room, your housekeeping.
Housekeeping. Okay.
Okay? But it's also maintenance and all that kind of stuff, right? Hotel services. We don't have those yet, so we don't need any. Food and beverage staff, front desk staff, conference and banqueting we don't need. Others is specifically only for 2 areas. We haven't got there yet, but it's for shop and leisure club. Okay, shop and leisure club. You don't have them, but you might add them. If you add them, you've got to staff them. Okay, maximum staff you should have, 2 for the shop, 4 for the leisure club. Okay, so that should never be above 6, just so you know. And that's when you're busy and you can justify having those things. Okay? These will change over time, obviously, especially depending on your hotel. You might add rooms, you might increase the size, you might add executive rooms, suites, etc. Okay? And you might get really busy. You might be super successful in your conference and banqueting and need loads of staff members there. And as you add areas, you've got to obviously up your department heads, and as you get busy, you need to as well. Okay? These are the rate that you pay them. Now with this, unlike these, you can go up and down with these according on your needs and not be penalised for going up and down. With your rates, you can't go down. You can only go up, right? You can understand this in the real world. You put your rates up for staff members, you can't say, sorry, I'm decreasing your pay. That's not going to go down too well, or you find yourself in court, right? So match this to your star level. If you're a luxury hotel, you've got to pay high rates, right?
It's the same.
If you're a budget hotel, the old saying is applicable: if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. Okay? So I would argue that you need good staff. And probably, as is the case here, your department heads, if you're on 2 here, your department head should be on 3. Okay? And it's the rate, it's not they all get paid the same rate, it's that they're paid in the job in which they do a lower, medium, or a high rate. Okay? So, with the staffing levels, the main thing you're looking at is that monthly indicator report, turnover for the previous month, looking at whether you're going to get busier or quieter for the next month, and then upping or decreasing staff based on that. Just be careful, because this can be your biggest cost. I've had people who are doing really well, but they're not making any money, and I look through their system to find out why, and they've got like 50 hotel services staff on, right? Even if you add 20, 30 rooms, the most you'll ever need is probably 30 to 35 in hotel services. Next, training. How much are you going to invest in training? These are very low amounts. Okay, if you're going to, this is for a budget hotel, this is per staff member per week. Okay, per staff member per week. So they're only spending $15 per department head per week to train them. Okay? You might well do a lot more than that, but a lot more than that might be, say, $60 or $70 for your department heads, and for everyone else, $25 to $40, say, per staff member. I've seen, again, people make the mistake of going to like 300 per staff member per week, and then they're making no profit and wondering why. Okay, so just be a little bit careful about that. Now, there is an argument, by the way, if you want to really dramatically train your staff when you take over the hotel, for the first month to maybe go really high, you just got to remember to put it down for the second month, okay, to reasonable levels. Advertising. So this is an important and slightly harder one. I would highly recommend that effects of advertising report in the market research to help you decide on the medium that you're going to use to advertise the product. Okay? So you've got a potential 6 campaigns that you can utilise. These top 3 run for the whole month, for the whole cycle. These bottom 3, you're only targeting one specific week in the cycle. So it's advertising just for 1 week in the cycle. My advice is use all of them every single cycle. Okay? You've got a lot of products. So initially you've got weekday, weekend rooms, you've got groups, you've got food, you've got beverages to advertise initially. You might then add suites, you might add executive rooms, you might add conferences, you might add events. So you've got a lot of stuff to advertise, right? There's no rule saying you can't advertise the same thing twice, although you've got a lot of things to advertise, that doesn't necessarily make too much sense. Rule of thumb would usually be your weekend and your weekday rooms would be campaigns A and B, because they're your main products, especially initially, and so you're going to want to have those advertised, right? So doing a 4-month year, you can go anything from 800 through to, say, 2,000, thereabouts, in these, and in these probably somewhere from about 500 through to 1,000 on these. Is it just a rule of thumb? Overall, your marketing spend, on average, just as an idea, should be about 10% of intended net profit. So if you're going to make $500,000, you could spend up to $50,000, okay, on your marketing, as a rule of thumb. Okay, so you can identify if you're spending too much or too little, but that's up to you. What you need to choose is what product you're going to advertise, where you're going to advertise it via. The effects of advertising market research will help you do this. The wrong one can be 5 times less impactful than the right one. That's a very, very big difference when it comes to marketing spend. Okay? So that's why I advise that. With this, same thing, but you've got to choose the week that you're going to spend in. So you've got some other stuff here. PR agency, you can choose to have this or not. Question mark will give you the details. It's about $700 a month and they work in the background. You choose whether you want that or not to get out there and try and get you better recognition in the marketplace. Having a social media page, this is the one thing I'm not going to give you any option on. I want everyone to do this. So I expect you to tick that. That means next cycle you'll start getting that social media information. It doesn't cost you anything. Okay? So I want everyone to do that. Weekly budget on search engine optimization. You guys don't know what this is, we can talk about it next month, but it makes sense to put some money into there. Minimum amounts on all of these 3, probably about $200-300. Anything up to $1,000 if you want to go that way. Again, you can choose your marketing strategy. Getting a web designer to develop your web page can help to increase traffic via your web page. Online advertising, again, can help to drive traffic via your web page. Environmental management system, we'll go quickly here. At the moment, you're not doing anything for the environment, right? Now, a couple of guests are happy, far right people usually, that you're not doing this, and they'll come stay at you specifically because of it. But a much larger contingent are not happy with you if this is how you operate. So there is an expectation that you become a little bit more sustainable from a CSR perspective, but it can be ridiculously expensive to go up to 2 or 3. So it might be something you want to do later, but initially you probably want to go up to level 1 on all, if not most of these, if not all of them. Just a quick thing to look at, and again I'm going to move a bit more quickly now. You go to the second page here, there's some certification that you can apply for. If you do this and you reach certain levels, you can get the EMAS. Once you've held it for a month, say, you go high, you get the ISO 14001, and then you go really high, you get the Green Globe. There are certain companies that won't send contracts your way and won't send conferences and events your way unless you meet certain standards, right? So there is the option for that. Refurbishing. The state of your hotel is not great at the moment. You need to refurbish it, is my advice. You can choose your level of refurb, as I mentioned before here. Your rooms, for example, are poor. That means poor, average, good, excellent. To get up to excellent is a level 3 refurb. Okay? The rest of your hotels are average. So average, good, excellent only needs a level 2 refurb to get it up to excellent. You then choose whether you want mid-range or luxury. There's a difference in cost to do so. But say, for example, with your rooms, you've got 125. You might not do them all at the same time. Because a level 3 refurb, again, details here, takes them out of circulation for 2 weeks. It's a big time to take them out of circulation. So you might want half of your rooms still operating during that time. Okay? Same with these, details are in there. All right. Guest comfort, this is your in-room experience. So these are your soaps and all that kind of stuff. Do they have basic soaps in the bathroom? Or do they have champagne, flowers and chocolates, right? The full shebang. Or anywhere in between. Again, this should match your star rating. Okay? Not a bad idea if you're going to do the suites and the executive rooms to leave the ability to be a level higher for those. Okay? So even if you're a 5-star hotel, you might go level 3 there and level 4 for those higher areas if you do. Again, there's a cost associated with each room sold. You can look at the question mark to identify it. Then you've got your in-room entertainment. Level 1 is an alarm clock next to the bed. Okay, level 4 is Bang & Olufsen surround systems and TVs. Okay, so again, you choose what's appropriate. You can also choose whether you want a concierge room lounge service. Again, should match your guest rating. Last but not least, we have our extra facilities. One of the most important things that you need to look at for your first set of decisions, like I said, you've got about $2 million sitting there. So you need to make some really important decisions about changing your hotel to establish the product that you're going to offer. You've got things like this, really important. Details here, but I can tell you it costs about $500,000 and it takes about 20 weeks to build. So if you're going to do it, the sooner you do it, the more time you have to get value from it, right? And then you start selling those conference and events, okay? So you might choose to do that. You might choose to do quick check-in, check-out. Doesn't cost very much. You might choose to add business services. There are other things that extra car parking you probably don't need straight away. Extending your restaurant you probably don't need straight away, right? You might want to add executive rooms or suites. There are minimum amounts. I think for memory, minimum amount here is 10 rooms. Minimum amount here is 5, and they're 500,000, 600,000 for 5 rooms. Okay, so there's a big cost here. What you don't want to do is run out of money. So you need to be a little bit careful about how much you spend. And there's nowhere where this is recorded. You've got to keep a note of it. Not just how much you spend, because you pay it when it completes, but when it completes. Because you don't want to run out of money when it completes. Because if you run out of money, i.e. you go massively into an overdraft, you get locked out the system. It goes into receivership and you can't make any decisions. Okay? So be a little bit careful with that. That's down to you. All right. You also want to choose whether you want internet access. I make sure the assumption you do, whether you want to charge for it, whether you want a minibar in the room, completely up to you. Once you've made that whole set of decisions, you then hit save and exit. Okay? Once you've done that, I hit the cycle button and we look at how you've done for the month by comparison to each other. And that's the HOTS process. Thank you very much.